Okay, now that we know how to record the bad debt expense, what you have to be able to handle is then write-offs. So what happens later on down the road when you learn that a specific customer isn't going to pay you? Then you have to write off that accounts receivable. Now, in the direct method, this is what triggered bad debt expense. We debited bad debt expense, credited the receivable. Well, now we've already, under the allowance method, recorded bad debt expense, and we credited the allowance for doubtful accounts. Well, now what we can do is we can offset that allowance for doubtful accounts by debiting it. Remember, we credited it before, and we can credit accounts receivable. So you can see it's kind of like a timing issue. So in step one in the allowance method, we debited we debited bad debt expense and credited the allowance account. Now, a little while later, when someone doesn't pay us, we debit the allowance account that offsets the previous credit to the allowance, and we credit AR. So kind of like the net effect of all that is debit bad debt expense, credit AR. It's the same kind of thing as the direct write-off method, but just over a period of time, you have to use this allowance account to allow us to record bad debt expense in the year that we made revenue, so we can have proper matching. So that's how you handle write-offs. Debit ADA, credit receivable. There's an example of that right there. That shows you how each T account balance is affected. The write-off affects only the balance sheet accounts. Okay, so your cash realizable value is the same, no problem there. All right, so what happens when you recover an uncollectible account? So you've written off an account, but then the customer pays you. This will happen a lot if a customer then wants to buy from you again. Typically, customers, you won't sell to the same customer over and over again if they're not paying you. So a recovery of an uncollectible account is handled like this. You have to put the write-off back, or reverse the write-off that we just did, so the AR is back on the books. Then you record a collection like we typically would before we even got to this chapter. You debit cash, credit down the AR to show the cash coming in. Okay, that is a recovery of a written off amount. The last step in this study objective is figuring out how do you arrive at this allowance amount, or this estimate of bad debt expense. Remember, they just gave it to us earlier up in the allowance discussion, where they said the manager just determined $12,000 wouldn't be collected. Well, how did he get that number? And the way that he got it is by determining a percentage of receivables that likely isn't going to be collected. And again, they've got history on their side. They know what percentage of receivables isn't going to be collected. And it varies by age of the receivable. So the person will create something called an aging of accounts receivable. It's a schedule that looks like this. It lists out all your customers, the total amount that they owe you, and then it puts an age on those amounts. So not due yet, and these are number of days past due. So this adder customer owes $600, and 300 of it is 1 to 30 days past due, and the other amount is this amount past due, and then over 90 days past due. Okay, so those add up to the 600 that they owe us. So you get all of these amounts for all these customers, and you end up with 39.6 in total receivables, and these are the ages. Now, the older the receivables get, the less likely you are to collect them at all. So the manager will put this kind of an estimate on each age group to determine what portion likely won't be paid. You simply multiply the amount by the percentage, and you get this estimated uncollectible amount. And here's the amounts from each of these age categories, and they sum to this 2,228. This right here is the amount that you believe won't be collected out of the 39.6 that you're owed. So this needs to be the balance in the allowance for doubtful accounts. Think of the balance sheet presentation. This is AR less the allowance for doubtful accounts. The difference would be the cash realizable value in AR, 37 something. Okay, so we're going to next look at the entry that it's going to take to make the allowance for doubtful accounts be this balance. All right, this is not the entry amount. This is the amount that the account needs to have a balance of.